Hello, this unit is on adding integers. So we're in our Unit 6 integers unit. Make sure you have your notes copy or that you have labeled the top of your page adding integers and are ready to take notes. So remember, integers are positive and negative whole numbers and 0. So if we're adding integers with the same sign, well, remember, since integers are negative and positive, if we have 3 plus 2, which we've known forever since we started doing addition, 3 plus 2 is 5, they're both positive, so they both equal, or the answer is going to be positive. If they're both negative, that just means that I have negative numbers and I'm adding more negative numbers to it, so my answer is also going to be negative. If you look here at negative 3 plus negative 2, here's our number line, and I just drew an arrow at 0. If we start at negative 3, so that means I'm going to find negative 3, and then I'm going to add negative 2, which means I'm going to go 2 to the left, and that takes me to negative 5, which really is the same as negative 3 plus negative 2. We would do 3 plus 2, keep the sign, and it's negative 5. So if you want to try these right here, you can pause and try and then come back. Negative 5 plus negative 7, it's really just 5 plus 7, which is 12, and then I keep the negative sign because I start with negative, like if it's negative 5 degrees and it drops 7 degrees, we're going to be at negative 12 degrees. Negative 10 plus negative 4 would just be 10 plus 4, which is 14. They're both negative, so we have to keep the sign, so it would be negative 14. So if I have negative and I add more negative, my answer has to be negative. We talked last week about opposites. Remember, opposites are the same distance away from 0, so like 3 and negative 3 are opposites. The additive inverse is the same thing as the opposite. It's just a different word for it. So you could just make sure you have these written down so you know these definitions. The additive inverse property states that the sum of any number and its additive inverse, or the opposite, is 0, which we talked a little bit about last week. But if we have 5 and we add negative 5, we get 0. If I have negative 10 and I add 10, I get 0. If I have 100 and I add negative 100, we would be at 0. Adding integers with different signs is where it gets a little bit trickier. So why don't you write down 5 plus negative 3 in your notebook? Okay, one of the methods we can use is a number line. It's good to at least understand and visualize a number line until you don't need a number line anymore, and then you can use a different strategy. So we're going to start at 0. So here's 0, okay, and then we get to 5. So I'm going to go this way all the way to 5. And then we're adding negative 3. So instead of adding positive 3, if it was positive 3, we would know that that would be 8. But I'm adding a negative 3, which means I'm going to go to the left and I'm going to go backwards. So then I would go 1, 2, 3, which would get me at 2. If we're at negative 3 plus 2, so here's 0. Start at negative 3. This time I am adding positive 2. So 1, 2. And that gets me to negative 1. I know that if I added 3, it would get me to 0. So adding 2 would just be one step away from 0. Okay, we'll do a couple more using a number line. So 6 plus negative 7. So if this is 0, here's 6. I'm adding negative 7. So I know that if I go negative 6 steps, it gets me to 0. So this was minus 6. And I need to do negative 7. So I'm going to do minus one more step, which would be a negative 1 step. Oops. Which would get me at negative 1. Negative 15 plus 19. Here's 0. Here's negative 15. I know that it's 15 positive steps to get to 0. And then I need 4 more positive steps so that it's adding 19, because 15 plus 4 is 19. So then my answer would be 4. Another way that we can do it is to, if we're adding integers with different signs, we can subtract their absolute values. And then the sum would be, it would be positive if, like if we have two numbers and we have more positives than negatives, my answer is going to be positive. If we have more negatives than positives, my answer would be negative. So let's look at a couple examples on the next slide. So I want you to write almost all of these down in your notebook, which seems like a lot, but then you'll have lots of extra practice and lots of notes to go back to. So 7 plus negative 1. Write that down. Okay, so first I ask myself, are the signs the same or different? They're different because I have a positive number and a negative number. So I'm going to rewrite it. This parenthesis is just separating the addition sign from the negative sign. It's doing absolutely nothing. It's literally this just there to separate it. You don't absolutely need it. It just helps keep it more organized. 7 plus negative 1. So if I take the absolute value of both numbers and subtract them, okay, so 7, the absolute value of 7 is 7. The absolute value of negative 1 is 1. If I subtract them, I get 6. And then I ask myself, do I have more positives or more negatives? I have more positives, so my answer is going to stay at positive 6. So really, I have 7 and I'm just taking 1 away. Negative 8 plus 3. Write that down. Different signs. So I'm going to take the bigger number, the bigger absolute value number, and subtract the smaller number. I know it's weird because we're adding, but we're turning it into subtraction, and we're going back to adding. So absolute value of negative 8 is 8. So I'm going to do 8 minus 3, and I get 5. This time I have more negatives than positives because I have 8 negatives and only 3 positives. So then my answer is going to be negative 5. So I have negative 8, and if you think of the number line, here's 0, here's negative 8, and I'm adding 3, so I'm going to go 3 jumps to the right, and that gets me to negative 5. Okay, 2 plus negative 15 plus negative 2. Looking at this one right here. I can see, so addition is commutative. These have the same signs, so it's easier to add them if they have the same signs. So negative 15 plus negative 2 is going to be negative 17, because remember we just add them together, keep the same sign. So I'm going to do 2 plus negative 17, and then go from there. So different signs, so I'm going to take 17 and subtract 2, which is 15. I have a lot more negatives than positives, so then it's going to be negative 15. Okay? Again, I'm starting at 2. If you think of it, you have $2, and I spend $17. Well, I went $15 into the hole because I only had $2 to spend. Pause me and try these 3, and then come back and check your work. So 10 plus negative 12, 10 plus negative 12 would be 12 minus 10 is 2. There's more negatives, so we would end up with negative 2. Negative 13 plus 18, different signs, so I subtract 18 minus 13. I get 15. 18 is higher than 13 and it's positive, so it stays 15. Negative 14 plus negative 6 is negative 20 plus 6, so negative 20. If I think on a number line, picture negative 20 and then do 6 steps to the right, you would end up at negative 14. 20 minus 6 is 14. There's more negatives, negative 14. I believe for those of you that have a packet, this is part of your packet. You don't need to write this whole slide down, but you might want to pause it and read it and write down things that are of importance to you. I would pick a couple things out of this slide to make sure to write down. The main thing is that additive inverse or opposites always equal 0. If we have 2 positives, our answer is going to be positive. 2 negatives, our answer is going to be negative. And then a positive plus a negative, or a negative plus a positive. It depends on if you have more positives or more negatives. That's all I have for you. Keep these notes handy for you to bring to class whenever the next class period is. Have a great day.